The restaurant table sat untouched, the single candle flickering like it was waiting for someone who would never arrive. The soft hum of evening chatter surrounded him, but Daniel felt painfully alone. The weight of loneliness pressed harder tonight than usual, not because he feared being stood up, but because he had promised his little girl that he would try again, that maybe this blind date arranged by his friend would help them move forward after years of living in grief. And now, staring at the empty chair across from him, Daniel slowly realized that the date wasn't coming. Yet he stayed seated, not out of hope for romance, but because a tiny hand tugged at his sleeve just minutes before, whispering that she wanted to meet the lady Daddy might like. When his 7-year-old daughter, Emily, looked up at him with those wide, bright eyes that mirrored her late mother's, he simply couldn't bring himself to leave. Tonight wasn't supposed to hurt, but it did, more than he expected. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected moments, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps these stories reach more hearts. As Daniel sat there, trying to compose himself, Emily swung her legs under the table, humming quietly as she drew shapes on a napkin. She had insisted on coming, saying that she didn't want her father to be nervous all alone. And despite every logical reason for him to refuse, he let her accompany him. There was something soothing about having her nearby, something grounding. She was the only reason he kept moving through life after losing his wife in a sudden accident 3 years ago. Her laughter had carried him through the darkest nights, and her tiny arms had been a reminder that life wasn't completely over. But as he looked around the elegant restaurant filled with couples and families enjoying their evenings, he couldn't help feeling that he didn't belong here. He had built a powerful reputation as a focused, disciplined CEO, a man who always seemed in control. Yet tonight, he felt like nothing more than a lonely father, terrified of disappointing his daughter again. Meanwhile, across town, a young mother named Lena rushed down the dimly lit street, one hand holding her worn handbag, the other gripping tightly to reality by sheer will. She had just finished her double shift at the small bakery where she worked, exhausted, but determined to pick up her son from her neighbor in time. She didn't have money to spare for late-night babysitting, and she certainly didn't have energy left for surprises, but life rarely cared for such things. As she hurried past the restaurant's glowing windows, she paused only because her son, little 4-year-old Oliver, tugged her sleeve and pointed to a beautifully decorated cake displayed outside. She bent down to admire it with him, brushing back her messy hair, trying her best to smile even though her bones ached. She had been struggling for years, ever since Oliver's father abandoned them before he was even born, leaving her with nothing but unpaid rent, debts, and a baby she promised to love with everything she had. What she didn't know, as she stood outside that same restaurant, was that her life was about to shift in a way she never imagined. Inside, Emily suddenly hopped off her chair, saying she saw someone cute outside. She raced to the glass window, pressing her hands against it, and her eyes widened at the sight of Oliver staring at the cake displayed on the decorative stand. Without hesitation, and before Daniel could stop her, she rushed toward the entrance. She pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped outside into the warm evening air. Emily had always been an empathetic child, something her teachers often described as an old soul wrapped in a small body. When she saw someone sad, she simply couldn't walk away. And something about the boy's longing gaze made her want to help. Lena was startled when the little girl approached them with a bright smile. Emily cheerfully told Oliver that the cake inside was much tastier than it looks, and then she turned to Lena and asked gently if they wanted to come inside. Lena almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Her clothes smelled faintly of flour and vanilla, her apron still dusted with powdered sugar, her hair tied in a loose tired bun. She knew she didn't belong anywhere as fancy as that restaurant, but Emily didn't seem to notice any of that. She reached for Lena's hand the way only children can, purely, innocently, without judgment, and said she wanted to share her dad's table because her date didn't come anyway. Those words struck Lena in a way she didn't understand. Something about the openness in the little girl's eyes made her hesitate. Part of her wanted to refuse immediately out of embarrassment, but another part, the part that had gone too many nights without feeling kindness, paused just long enough for Emily to pull her gently inside. When Daniel looked up and saw his daughter walking toward him with a young woman and a small boy in tow, he froze. The woman appeared nervous and flushed from working, but her eyes held a softness, worn but genuine. He noticed how tightly she held the little boy's hand, as if afraid someone might judge them or turn them away. Emily, meanwhile, proudly introduced them as her new friends, insisting they sit with them so Daddy won't feel alone anymore. For a moment, Daniel didn't know how to react, but before he could speak, the little boy offered him a shy, toothy smile, and something inside Daniel softened. He invited them to sit, realizing how much sincerity there was in Emily's gesture. The awkwardness of the situation lingered briefly, yet somehow, the warmth of Emily's kindness dissolved it piece by piece. Soon enough, Lena found herself sitting across from Daniel, apologizing quietly for intruding, but he reassured her with a calm voice that it was perfectly okay. In truth, he found himself unexpectedly relieved to have company, especially company that didn't expect him to perform or impress. As the evening unfolded, the two children instantly bonded, giggling and sharing stories. Their innocent laughter created a peaceful bubble around the table, shielding the adults from the weight of their burdens for a little while. Daniel listened as Lena explained she worked long hours to care for her son alone. Her humility struck him deeply. There was determination in her voice, the kind that comes from surviving hardship no one else sees. She didn't ask for sympathy, she simply spoke with quiet strength. And while Daniel didn't usually open up to strangers, he found himself telling her pieces of his own life, that he lost his wife, that he had been trying but failing to move forward, that his daughter was his guiding light. At one point, Emily stared at Lena with a gentle expression and whispered something Daniel almost didn't hear. "Daddy, she looks a little like Mommy." He turned sharply to look at his daughter, but she wasn't talking about appearance. She was talking about warmth, the familiar softness, the soothing energy, the kindness. Daniel felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Not romantic attraction, not instantly, but a rare sense of peace. As dinner arrived, Daniel noticed how Lena carefully cut her food into smaller pieces to share with her son, telling him to eat slowly so he wouldn't choke. It reminded him of how his late wife used to care for Emily with infinite gentleness. And when he offered to order something extra for Oliver, Lena blushed with embarrassment, insisting she could not accept gifts. But Daniel didn't push. He simply shared a bit of his meal with Oliver, making the boy beam with joy. Slowly, Lena relaxed. The lines of exhaustion on her face softened as she allowed herself, even if briefly, to enjoy the moment. She hadn't sat at a proper restaurant table in years. Not since. She lost almost everything. Watching her son laugh freely felt like a miracle, and for a moment, she forgot the fears waiting outside those beautiful walls, the overdue rent, the empty fridge, the constant worry over whether she was enough. Sitting with a stranger who treated her like she mattered felt overwhelming in a way she wasn't prepared for. But underneath the warm glow of that evening, something else was building. Something subtle, delicate, but powerful. Daniel found himself noticing how easily Lena connected with Emily, how she knelt down to comfort the girl when she accidentally spilled her juice. He watched the way Lena spoke gently to Oliver, encouraging him to use polite words, teaching him with love rather than scolding. He hadn't seen parenting like that in years. It stirred old memories of nights when he and his wife shared quiet moments watching Emily sleep, and for the first time since her death, the ache of those memories hurt a little less. When the dinner ended, Daniel reached for his wallet, but Lena immediately protested, insisting she would pay her share. Daniel could see her pride, her dignity, and the unspoken fear of being seen as a burden. He gently assured her that it was his pleasure, that she had done more for him tonight than she realized. Lena didn't understand, but she saw something sincere in his eyes. She finally nodded, thanking him with a soft voice that held more gratitude than words could contain. Outside, under the warm streetlights, the night breeze brushed past them as the children hugged each other goodbye. Emily held onto Lena's hand for a moment longer, as if reluctant to let go. And in that fleeting second, Daniel saw it clearly. The universe had delivered him an unexpected moment of grace through the kindness of a child. He asked if they needed a ride home. Lena hesitated again, torn between fear of accepting help and the desperation of facing a long walk with a sleepy child. Eventually, she accepted, just this once. During the drive, the children dozed off in the back seat, and the quiet allowed a strange new comfort to settle between them. It wasn't romantic. It was something gentler, two wounded souls recognizing each other in the dark. After dropping them off, Daniel watched from the car as Lena carried her son up the steps of a small, worn-down apartment building. She waved once, shyly, then disappeared inside. But that night, long after he put Emily to bed, Daniel found himself unable to forget the image of Lena disappearing into that old building, carrying struggles he could only imagine. And Lena, as she tucked Oliver into bed, cried softly after he slept, not from sadness but from the overwhelming kindness she experienced from strangers when she expected nothing at all. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement truly helps us bring more emotional stories to life. Before the ending, tell us in the comments, would you have accepted the little girl's invitation the way Lena did? And with that, the night that began with an empty blind date became the night two families unknowingly stepped into each other's lives, guided by the innocence of children, the quiet persistence of hope, and the smallest acts of unexpected kindness.